Welcome back to Close Up. Holding down the fort as a moderate means you're going to get incoming fire from the left and the right, and that's especially true if you're running for president. So far, Michael Bennet has weathered the storm, but he's still looking to gain traction in the 2020 primary and is our guest this morning. Senator,
thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me come back.
So your friend and former colleague, John Hickenlooper, has dropped out of the race and is hoping to join you in the Senate now. Is that the right move for it?
Well, he had to make that decision for himself, and I think he went out in a really classy way. I'm not surprised that he did it that way, and he's thinking over the weekend about what he's going to do. So whatever help I can give him in making that decision, I'll be glad to help him.
Do you think we're going to see other candidates reevaluating their candidacies in the weeks to come because of the debate threshold?
I think that people will be forced to think about that. I'm going to have a hard time making the third debate, for example. I don't think that's fatal to my campaign, and I don't think it should be. You know, I think the DNC has used a set of criteria that basically has turned us all into money launderers of one kind or another, unless we were really well known at the beginning of the process. And this is really early to be winnowing a field. You know, I've been in the race for, I think, 3.5 months. There are people obviously that have been in a lot longer than I have. But every week I move up just a little bit, and I think I'm getting some traction. It feels to me like that ought to be reflected in the decision about who's on the debate stage, but I'm not the DNC. So we're just going to keep putting one foot in front of the other and having meetings all throughout New Hampshire and Iowa, and it's been fabulous.
So there's no perfect system, obviously,
right,
other than the first in the nation primary, I should say. But you would argue that what's going on right now is unfair.
I would argue that it's not. I would argue that more than it's being unfair, it's detrimental to our being able to select a candidate through this process that's in the position to beat Donald Trump. I mean, I really do believe, having now spent months in New Hampshire and Iowa, that I'm where most people are in these states and where the base of the Democratic Party is. That's a different place than Bernie is, for example. And it's a place I think we need to be able to win states like Colorado and Iowa and Maine and Arizona, and to have a hope of winning the Senate as well as the presidency.
You've got a new book out on Russian interference in the 2016 election specifically. And some of this was inspired by an interaction you had here in New Hampshire in a senior center. Tell us about that.
It's absolutely true. So this is the book. It's called Dividing America, and it's about the Russian attack on our democracy in 2016, which President Trump still will not say happened. And I was in a senior center here in Manchester a few weeks ago, and a guy said to me very nicely on the way out, but he said, just tell Obama to stop spending the money we should be spending on veterans, on refugees, and or stop him from spending the money on refugees that we should be spending on veterans. That's straight out of the Russian propaganda. That's straight out of what the Russians were doing to our democracy. And I published the book for two reasons. One, I wanted the American people to see what that propaganda looked like. And second, we need Mitch McConnell to put the election protection legislation on the floor of the Senate. So if you go to RussiaHackedOurDemocracy.com, you can not only read the book for free or download it for yourself, you can send a copy of it to Mitch McConnell to try and inspire him to put the election protection legislation on the floor. I think 2,500 people have already signed up to send a book to Mitch, and I'd like to double that number.
And obviously the hashtag Moscow Mitch has now been tagged to the leader. He's saying this is a modern day McCarthyism, adding another layer of Russian angle here. What do you think about that?
I don't even understand what he means by that. What's ridiculous is that anybody who calls himself a leader, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, won't put legislation, bipartisan legislation, on the floor to protect our elections. I'm on the Intelligence Committee. We put out a report three weeks ago or so saying this was really serious what the Russians did. And in fact, they're still doing it. The Mueller report says they're still doing it. And there's only one person that can put that stuff on the floor. It's Mitch McConnell. But, you know, he's too busy working with Donald Trump to rack up the biggest debt that we've ever had on our balance sheet. You know, he and Trump, these guys ran for office saying they were going to be fiscally responsible. And they have been the least fiscally responsible people that, you know, they're the least fiscally responsible living politicians in America. And I don't think they should be able to get away with that, and I don't think he should be able to get away with not responding to what, you know, a bipartisan group of senators want to do to protect this country.
You had one of your strongest moments in the most recent debate on the issue of education, talking about the inequalities in the system. So under a Bennett administration, would we see the Department of Education, obviously funding being a big part of that, would you seek more control, though, over some of these failing schools and districts in order to make sure that those dollars are spent wisely?
Absolutely not. I would not seek more control. I was a school superintendent. I ran a large urban school district with $1 billion budget and 95,000 kids. And the last thing I think we need is people in Washington telling us how we should run our schools. But we have a fundamental problem in America, which is that our education system is reinforcing the income inequality that we have. And I'd like to be a president that says, I think that together, working with governors and school superintendents and mayors, we can make our system of education once again the greatest in the world. And it used to be that way. There was a time when education was the wind at our back after World War II. Today, as I say, it is a headwind. It's reinforcing the inequality that we have. I'll just give you one example. You know, for kids in our country that are graduating from high school and not going to college, which is 70% of the kids in America, their only choice is to get a minimum wage job. I think that we should be pushing ourselves so that when you are graduating with a high school diploma, what that means is that you can earn a living wage, not just the minimum wage. And I know we can do that. I know how to do that. And that would transform the lives of millions of Americans, and it would transform the American economy. That's just one aspect of what we need to do, but it's really important.
On health care, you're not on board with Medicare for All, and it's evolved here that when you make your points on those issues, some of the candidates who are in favor of Medicare for all are saying, oh, those are just Republican talking points. Yeah. You got to admit, you know, hearing President Trump at the rally in Manchester, some of the points he was making about spending were similar. So how do you navigate a situation in which you're being tagged as a Republican with Republican talking points?
It doesn't make them Republican talking points to repeat Bernie Sanders' own talking points. Bernie said famously during the debate about Medicare for All, I wrote the damn bill, and he did, just like I wrote the damn bill on the public option, which I think, and it's been great to see candidates like Mayor Pete and Joe Biden decide that the public option is where they want to land, because I think they see the political peril in supporting Bernie's ideological approach to this, which requires us, not Republican talking points, Bernie's talking points, makes all private insurance illegal except for what he calls cosmetic insurance, which is plastic surgery insurance, and puts a $33 trillion tax on the American people to pay for it. You know, this is why in Vermont they tried to pass single-payer health care there, and it failed because once people knew what the taxes would be, they said, we're not going to do it. Just to give you a sense of the scale of what Bernie's talking about, and again, I'm not quoting Donald Trump, I'm quoting Bernie. The scale of what he's talking about, it's $33 trillion over the next 10 years once we pass it in new taxes. That is 70% of the total taxes the federal government's going to collect for the next 10 years. I don't think the American people are prepared to increase their taxes by 70% for the privilege of making private insurance illegal in this country. I think what they want is to have an option for themselves and for their families that will create competition and drive down costs, and that's what Medicare X is. And my travels around Iowa and New Hampshire make it crystal clear to me that that's what people are looking for, not Bernie's plan.
Do you believe that President Trump will be a lot harder to defeat in 2020 than most Democrats think?
I do believe he will be harder to defeat than most Democrats think. And I'm worried that, you know, we can't be complacent and we can't disqualify ourselves. I think we lost to Donald Trump, a man who's manifestly unqualified for the job of president, you know, because people were so fed up with Washington, D.C., that they were willing to send a reality TV star there because they figured we couldn't do any worse. Now we know we can do worse. The guy said he'd pay off the debt. He's driven up the deficit. The guy still hasn't come up with a health care plan. And 2 years into his presidency, he's saying, well, I'll give it to you next time after I get reelected. And he's literally taken insurance away from millions of Americans. We've never had an American president take insurance away from millions of Americans.
Senator Bennett, we thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Hope to see you back here next time. We appreciate it.
Thanks.